by Hamas and other groups lit up the sky. Most of the rockets were intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome defense system. A state of emergency has been declared in the central city of Lod after protests by Palestinians escalated to full-scale riots. Lod and other towns with mixed populations have been gripped by angry demonstrations.
We must act against all of those who try to attack Israeli citizens or the state of Israel.
The violence in Lod broke out after the funeral of a Palestinian who had been killed by an Israeli settler a day earlier. The international community has appealed for an end to the unrest.
These kinds of attacks must stop. We have to protect the rights of the Palestinians within the framework of international law, of course.
The United Nations is urging Israel to avoid forced expulsions and employ maximum restraint. But UN Middle East Peace Envoy Tor Wenslin has warned that the situation is escalating towards a full-scale war. Natasha Hussain, TRT World.
All right, let's go live now to occupied East Jerusalem, where our reporter Mohammed Al-Qasim is standing by. Mohammed, just bring us up to speed with where you are right now and the situation there, please.
Well, the situation is still tense after what happened last night in the Israeli Arab city of Lod, where clashes took place overnight, and the Prime Minister declared the state of emergency in the city after one Palestinian resident of the city of Lod was murdered by a Jewish gunman in the city, which escalated the level of tension. Palestinian citizens of Israel have been going out in protest in solidarity with the Gaza Strip, as well as with the Al-Aqsa mosque in occupied East Jerusalem, as well as the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. But what happened there in the last couple of days, where attacks have been leveled more on Israeli Arab citizens, that created high tension among everyone. And I have with me here Ahmed Safadi that will talk to us about this situation. شكرا على اللقاء. اشرح لنا إذا لو سمحت عن ما هي الأسباب وراء هذا الأزمة في للمواطنين الفلسطينيين داخل إسرائيل.
الواضح أن استراتيجية الاحتلال بدأت هنا بخطأ الاستراتيجية باب العمود لم يتح المكان، واستخدم المستوطنين القوة وحماتهم قوات الاحتلال، انتقلت إلى الشيخ جراح ومن ثم انتقلت إلى أنحاء المدن في الداخل الفلسطيني، وذلك لأنه لا يوجد رادع للاحتلال للمستوطنين، والاحتلال استخدم مزيدا من القوة والبطش، ويريدون أن نتلقى الضربات وألا نحرك ساكنا، وهذا ما حصل باللد بسبب الضوء الأخضر للمستوطنين وقوات الاحتلال أدى إلى مقتل واستشهاد الشاب، وأشعل كل الأوضاع حاليا لأن الاحتلال استخدم استراتيجيات خاطئة.
What Mr. Safadi says here, that the Israeli security forces, the Israeli government has given the green light to the Israeli settlers and the Israeli citizens who are residing in mixed cities inside Israel to basically exercise their aggression and attack Arab residents and citizens of Israel without having to worry about any repercussions. They say that this whole thing started with the Palestinian citizens of Israel standing in solidarity with the Jerusalemites in occupied East Jerusalem and in solidarity with Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood and as well as with the Gaza Strip. And this is not going to be stopped, and this is not going to be, they're not going to be intimidated by all these aggressions. ماذا سيحدث الآن بعد الليلة الدامية بالأمس؟ ماذا نتوقع الآن? What should we expect tonight after the bloody and deadly night that we witnessed yesterday?
هذا بيعتمد على ردود أفعال وخطط، لأنهم هم من يصنع الفعل ويصنع التوتير قوات الاحتلال، فإذا هم أرادوا التهدئة أصبح هنالك هدوء، ولكن إذا صعدوا اتجاه غزة فالقدس لن تسكت، كما غزة ناصرة القدس فالقدس تناصر غزة، وأيضا إذا هدأوا الأوضاع في اللد وفي قرى شمال فلسطين، وهذا بيعتمد بشكل أساسي على الشيخ جراح. إذا كفوا أيديهم عن بيوت الشيخ جراح تهدأ الأمور، وإلا ستستمر وتتصاعد أكثر فأكثر.
So what Mr. Safadi is saying here is that the key to diffusing the situation lays with the Israeli government and the Israeli security forces. If they take their hands off the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, if they stop their illegitimate steps to uproot Palestinians from that neighborhood, then things will move slowly toward calm. But if that continues, if the aggression against Al-Aqsa Mosque and Sheikh Jarrah, as well as the continuation of airstrikes over the Gaza Strip, then more of the same will continue to happen. I should say that tonight there are at least 25 different demonstrations are scheduled in 25 different town and Arab villages inside Israel. Those are the ones that we only been able to compile within the last hour or two. But if what happened last night is an indication, we expect that number to double in the next hour. And we're only a couple of hours away from iftar. That's when Muslims break their fasting, and within an hour or so from that, we expect protesters to take to the streets in those different villages and towns and confront the police. And they want to send a message to the Israeli government that they want to be treated equally. They are citizens of the state of Israel, and they want to be treated like everybody else. Their main complaint is that they are marginalized and they're not being given their full rights.
Okay, Mohammed Al-Qasim in occupied districts, and thank you, Mr. Safadi, for providing us with your perspective. Now, Munir Nusaba is a professor of international law at Al-Quds University. He says that the international community has failed to hold Israel accountable for its many crimes.
Israel, unfortunately, has been used to impunity for all the decades of its life, since 1948, since it was established on the land of Palestine. It has been protected by the world's superpowers, most importantly the United States, but also before that, France and Britain. The United Nations Security Council have been immunizing Israel from any sanctions, regardless of how what type of crime is conducted. And this has been the case until now. The development of the International Criminal Court is quite recent, and I think that Israel is still not used to the fact that there is an international court that has jurisdiction over the occupied Palestinian territory and has jurisdiction over its soldiers and leaders because they are committing crimes in the occupied Palestinian territory. So they are still going on with their old narrative. They always have two stories to tell. Either that the court is anti-Semitic, which is obviously a crazy allegation. Also, they always use another argument that somehow all the states single them out without any justification. And that despite the fact that there are human rights violations happening everywhere around the world, that as if everybody is focusing only on Israel, and that's also not true.
Well, the United States continues to denounce rocket fire from Gaza and has supported what it calls Israel's right to defend itself. Now, that position has drawn sharp rebuke from Turkey, which questions whether Israel is acting in self-defense. Anis Qasim is a Palestinian legal advisor. He says the solution to the current trouble could be new leadership on both sides.
The alternative is another leadership like the existing leadership to make deals with the occupation authorities. That's what happened with Yasser Arafat, and that is what happened with Mahmoud Abbas. Those leaderships are corrupt leadership. We have to get rid of them. Let the Palestinian people lead their struggle. They know what they are doing. Look at the people in Jerusalem, in Sheikh Jarrah, in Gaza, in Palestine 48, in Lidda, in Haifa. They are leading the struggle. They don't need leadership. The leadership is corrupt. We have to face the Israelis face to face. We can deal with the Israelis. Palestinian people are able to deal with the Israelis. They are not worried about the Israelis. They are worried about their leadership, which is really stabbing them in the back. What matters really is that we need a Palestinian original, genuine leadership to lead the struggle. We don't need help. What we need, we can handle the Israelis. We need really a newly elected leadership by the PNC, not the PA. The PA is a product of the military governor of Israel in the occupied territories. We don't need that. That is what Oslo is all about. They created created an autonomous leadership which is really corrupt and well bought by the occupying authorities. We don't need that. We need the PLO leadership, not the PA leadership, not the PA election, not the presidential election. All of this is a product of the occupation authority, and they are all corrupt.
Well, perhaps the only country that can have a real impact on what's happening in Israel and the occupied territories right now is the United States. Let's go to Washington, D.C. and speak to our correspondent, Courtney Keeley, who's joining us live. Courtney, good to have you with us. Now, there is growing pressure in the US among some politicians on the Democratic side to see Joe